Good morning or good late morning, everyone. This is Colin Young coming to you from Arizona. With me, I've got our coach, Andrew Siquieros. Don't worry if you can't see us yet. We haven't launched the video. We will here in just a couple moments. Just a few housekeeping items before we get going. If you'd like to follow along, there's a couple ways for you to do that. If you don't have Google Drive access or you want to just go ahead and use the Word document, it's attached as a handout to the GoToWebinar, so you can jump into that. If you do have Google Drive access, I've also included the link in the chat box. So Andrew put some materials together to help you follow along during his presentation. Go ahead and download a copy of that. Take some notes if you'd like. Also, too, please send us your questions through the chat box as we go through this presentation. I will be behind the scenes kind of putting them all together, and we'll be able to ask Andrew at the end of this presentation to go through some of those questions. So don't hesitate to reach out. Love all those questions that you guys always send each week. And then finally, if you have questions or comments or feedback on the webinar, please send them to continuousimprovement@teamexos.com. I know that all the reminders come to you from Hannah McElwain. It truly is just her letting us use her GoToWebinar account, and that's the only reason that she's attached to this. So please email continuousimprovement@teamexos.com. You guys have been doing a great job of that recently. Hannah hasn't had to forward anything to us, so it's been fantastic. So appreciate that. Again, we'll get going here in just a minute or two. Again, don't worry if you can't see us. That'll happen here in a second. But really excited to have Andrew here with me today to chat about ESD programming and execution for the general population. And excited for you guys to jump on and join us. So thank you, and we'll get started here in just a minute.
All right. Hi, guys. So I'm Andrew. I've been a performance coach here at Exos AZ for about 2.5 years. I started as an intern in the fall of 2015, so about 3 years ago. And then I was hired on as a part-time coach, slowly worked my way up into a full-time position here with the company. And I've been mostly coaching a lot of general population and specific VIP groups that come in-house. They want to come see the facility and kind of check out what we got going on here in the desert. So for today, what we have programmed for you guys is going over programming and execution for general population ESD. This has been a kind of a big question because how do we balance things out as far as people who only train a couple times a week versus more often than not, we get guys up to 5-6 times a week, which is a little bit tough from the programming aspect so that you're not tiring people out, keeping the injury risk very low because the population is so all over the place with ages and training ages and things like that. So thank you for joining me today. We can go ahead and get started. So we'll just kind of go over a slight overview of where I kind of take things, and I'll draw some stuff out on the board for you guys to see. Starting out, so we're going over ESD. ESD is number 4 in our Exos system, right? So pillar prep, movement prep, strength and power, ESD, which is kind of on the back end, and then regen after that. So it must be appropriately prescribed for these guys. Like I said, here at Exos AZ, we give our adult population, our general population, a chance to train up to 6 times a week. So we run a lot bigger groups from 6 a.m., 12 p.m., and 6 p.m. And then I have some semi-private guys who get a little bit more specific in their programming and their goal needs. So kind of getting into it, we do program for the different zones specifically. Sometimes that can be a challenge depending on the phase that we're in with our lift, or if we have people on vacation, summertime, people like to get out of Arizona. So it kind of, numbers will kind of drop down, attendance drops down a little bit, but we still have to get people that are here the work that they need. So kind of going across the week, we'll start Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. We do train on Wednesdays here, Thursday, Friday, and then also Saturday, right, is like our 6 training days of the week. On the first, outside of the days, these would be our strength days as well. So I'll kind of throw that in there just so we have that kind of in our mindset here. Oops, there we go. And then we still program ESD across the board. So kind of getting into things, the way that I like to program for it is on Monday, I like to typically hit what we call green zone, right? And we'll kind of get into these a little bit differently. Tuesday can get a little bit more towards red zone, right? So we kind of start the week a little bit moderate intensity, kind of keeping people wanting to come back the next day. Tuesday, we can get a little bit higher intensity. Wednesday, we have something called sweat and stretch here. So I'll kind of write that out. And what that entails is a little bit more yellow zone. Okay, we kind of treat that as like a regen day. Thursday, we kind of come back to a green zone type of day. Friday, hit them with red zone. And then for the guys that like to come on Saturdays, I actually coach that group. I like to go with a little bit more Metcon style, right? So we're kind of, for a full hour, just come in, turn and burn, get it in, get it out. Right now, football season is big, so a lot of people attend the Saturday morning class so that they can have a little bit more leeway in their afternoons. So getting into that, okay, we'll kind of start in the green zone area here. Now, the way I typically like to program for green zone is a lot of interval work, and that'll be somewhat of like a 1-to-1 work to rest ratio. So we're kind of here, right? We can go 30 on, 30 off times 6 to 10 rounds, depending on the phase that we're in. Also depending on the attendance that people are coming. So if I have somebody who only comes on Mondays and Thursdays to train, and their training age is pretty low, I will actually kind of taper them more towards like 6 to 8 rounds here, as opposed to 8 to 10 rounds at like people who have been coming for years and are a little bit more consistent with their attendance that are coming. So with that, a couple examples of that I will do is, again, the 30 on, 30 off. To keep people engaged with that, I like to use partner work. So I'll be like, okay, you and a partner are going to use this piece of equipment. Player 1, you're going on for 30 while player 1 is on. Player 2, you're resting, and then we're going to switch. That keeps people engaged. It gives people a sense of community. They're working together towards a common goal, and then they have somebody that holds them accountable if they start to kind of fall back on their pace, or they're not hitting their goals or their numbers. That person can then step in and be a teammate to them while I continue to coach the rest of the group. So that makes things a little bit easier on my end to coach, because now I have almost like a second person to help motivate them, and it's an external motivation as opposed to me just having to yell at people all the time to keep it up. With this, another thing I'll do is I'll give people like a user choice of their equipment. So here we have, the Versas, we have treadmills, rowers, bikes, ellipticals, things like that. So with the general population, sometimes certain pieces of equipment can be intimidating. For example, the Versas, some people have not been on a Versa ever before, or you don't have access to a Versa. I'll give people that choice, and then I step back and run the clock. So if one day they want to ride the bike for 30 on, 30 off with a partner, or the next day they want to row, or one day they do want to go on the Versa Climber, like, they can have that choice, and they can decide where they want to push themselves and kind of what piece of equipment they want to use for that specific session. Again, those are on Mondays and Thursdays typically when I program, just to keep things fairly light, right? They're coming off of a weekend here, so I want to get them slow drip back into the system off the weekend. And then Thursday, they're coming off of a sweat and stretch day or a regen day. So again, we're kind of slow dripping back into the system, so we're not flip-flopping too much there. Getting into some of the yellow zone work, right? So this is a little bit more light endurance work. typically done on Wednesdays. Sometimes I'll give people the option to do something on Sunday, or I'll kind of throw it out as a tip of the day. Like, hey, the weather's nice, go for a hike, go for a light walk, take the dogs to the park, whatever you want to do, just get outside, get moving for a while. And this can typically be like a 2-to-1 work to rest ratio, sometimes even as high as like a 3-to-1 work to rest ratio. And then we're going to go for a little bit longer duration. So with the green zone, I usually try to keep that around 10 to 12 minutes long here. Oops, that's an M. There we go. Same here, 10 to 12 minutes, depending on the person. On Wednesdays, sweat and stretch. With this, again, 2-to-1 ratio can be like a 40 on, 20 off. 3-to-1 can be a 45 on, 15 off. But people are going to automatically kind of self-pace, because what I like to do is give this about a 15 to 20 minute time cap, right? So if I say, hey, we have 40 seconds on, 20 seconds off, times 15 rounds, right? People are going to start doing the math on their own. Okay, hey, that's 15 minutes. I'm going to be at this place for 15 minutes. They will start to self-pace. What that causes me to do is step back a little bit and be able to point people in the right direction, or get people set up on different pieces of equipment. But then it also just gives people a chance to move, right? If we're coming off of a red zone day plus a strength day, people are typically sore, especially when we start a new program. So this Wednesday, kind of treated as a regen day, really helps kind of keep them feeling good, keeps people out of injury risk, things like that. And then what I like to do, we call it the sweat because it's 15 to 20 minutes of specific cardio. But then stretch, I'll throw in like mobility and stability work, right? With that, so I add those together, and it gets people sweating for one, which people love feeling accomplished when they're sweaty. Usually it's easy to do that here in AZ. I can just get people outside walking around and they'll start to sweat, right? They start to feel good. The heat also will start to loosen things up, so when they're sore and they've been sweating for about 20 minutes, they start feeling less sore. They start feeling better when they're leaving than when they came in. And then pairing that with the mobility and stability work gives them that regen effect, right? We're starting to hit some soft tissue. We're starting to open things up. General population, usually they have things that are bound up. So I like to pair those two together because it keeps them limber, right? And then makes them feel better. Again, I'll do that usually Wednesdays. If we have a short week, I'll kind of flip things around. And then Sunday, I'll just kind of throw something out there, go for a walk, go for a light bike ride, go for a light swim, things like that, just to get people moving. And that's typically as far as our yellow zone work will go. One thing that can kind of be yellow zone that I like to do typically on either Thursdays if I can, or sometimes I'll do it on Wednesdays, is I'll actually have like a play day, right? Play. So we'll get people outside. We're fortunate enough here to have turf and basketball courts and space that we can get people moving. So what I'll do here is, and this can kind of bounce back and forth between green and red, or green and yellow, depending on the day. We'll go out and play like ultimate handball, or some bump out, or spike ball, and just get people moving. But it gets people off of equipment, right? Everybody doesn't like to ride a bike all the time. Everybody doesn't like to be on the verse climb all the time. So it'll actually break the script and get people either into yellow zone if we're just kind of playing handball and they're just aimlessly running around the field, or if we're playing, some spike ball and it's a couple quick seconds of action and then we have to go chase the ball down and bring it back. Right now they're getting that 1-to-1 work to rest ratio for an extended amount of time. If we're playing ultimate frisbee, where we're getting longer with people and people can run the whole field, they'll be able to move a little bit more and their rest won't be as long, I guess you could say, because they're trying to cover field and then get back and play defense, and then go and cover field and get back and play defense. So I like to throw in play days just to kind of break the script and keep things fun. That keeps people engaged. They look forward to play days. Here at headquarters, we have every day is game day on the wall. So I like to point that out whenever we're on a game day. I'm like, guys, like, it's on the wall for a reason. We get to have fun. So that's another kind of quick way to just throw in some yellow zone or even some green zone ESD, depending on what equipment you have available to you. Tapping into red zone can be a little tricky. So we'll kind of start there. So red zone, again, I'll kind of bookend in the middle of the weeks and then at the end of the week. So on Tuesday, we can go red zone here, which would be something like a 1 to 5, right, work to rest ratio on both days there, 1 to 5. So short, quick burst, very violent, very high intense work, and then we get a longer duration of rest. And then typically that can go anywhere from 6 to 10 minutes, depending, again, on how conditioned people are, their training age, their attendance. Typically people who only come, say they come Tuesday, Thursday, so they're getting a red zone and a green zone ESD. I'll limit them to about 6 to 8 rounds because they're not training as often as people who are hitting the whole system. And then Thursday, I'll try to push them a little bit more towards that 10 to 12 round range. That way everything can kind of balance out. With the red zone ESD, a big thing that people have a hard time with is being able to push into that red zone factor. A lot of people don't really know what it means to go max intensity, right, or full out effort. They'll see 6 to 10 rounds and they will try to self-pace, which can kind of be an obstacle as a coach. We know from a professional standpoint that it needs to be high intensity, max effort work in order to get the adaptation that we want. But the client doesn't know that. All they see is, hey, I'm on for 10 seconds, hey, I'm off for 50 seconds. So a couple ways that I'll kind of aid red zone ESD is competitions. So I say, hey, okay, you and a partner are going to flip-flop, and we are racing against her and a partner. And so I'll get 2 people competing against each other. Therefore, we'll go max effort, right? So let's say, for example, versus climber, it's easy to use a versus climber. We're going teams of 5. You're going to do a 100-foot sprint, and then you're going to rotate out in your team of 5, and it's this team of 5 versus that team of 5. So now we're on 1 to 5 work to rest ratio, which is here because you have 5 people on your team. And then it's a competition against somebody else, right? And we're going in 100-foot intervals. So a 100-foot interval should take the average person anywhere from 20 to 30, 35 seconds. So we're getting that work, that quick, high intensity, max effort work because they're trying to race to 100 feet, but then they're stepping off and they're getting that extra rest that they need because they have to wait for their turn to come back. Utilizing the competition aspect, people don't like to be last, right? And people usually love to win. If you don't love to win, something's a little bit off there. So putting 2 people against each other, one in a competition setting as I got to beat him to 100 feet, and then as a team, we have to beat that other team to X amount of feet. We're going 5, 6, 7, 8 rounds, whatever it has to be. So that is a great way to just get people moving fast and at a full velocity and at a max effort and turning the page and going over, but then utilizing that long rest that they get over and over and over again. So that's always a great way. Competitions were great for red zone ESD. We love having fun. We crank the tunes. I'm yelling, people are yelling, everybody's hooping and hollering, and there's a winner and there's a loser, and it's a great atmosphere. It brings the people together, and everybody gets sweaty, and we worked hard, and it's a good session. Another way to do red zone ESD again is the team effort. So I can say, hey, all right, guys, as a team of 5, you have 5,000 feet to climb. You're going in, 10-second intervals, 15-second intervals, and try to get there as fast as you can. And then as that team of 5, they just keep rocking and rolling with the time on their side, and they still get that 1 to 5 work to rest ratio or 1 to 4 or whatever it has to be. Another thing that I like doing, I didn't put it on the sheet, but I was thinking about it as we ran one yesterday, is AMRAPs on a piece of cardio equipment with a team or even by themselves. It's like, okay, you have 10 seconds on, 50 seconds off. We're going as many rounds as possible in X amount of time, and then we're going to see if you can hit a certain goal. So for instance, if you're going 10 on, 50 off, your goal is 500 feet on the versa climber. So you should be averaging about 50 feet per climb, and it gets people in that mindset that they have to work harder. They have a certain goal to hit in a certain amount of time, and then that will kind of feed into that red zone ESD because they're pushing to hit that certain number. And if they don't hit that certain number, then they know the next time they have to go a little bit harder. And before we know it, we're hitting that threshold of max effort and still getting that extra amount of rest on the bottom. So those are great ways to just kind of piece things together and get people engaged without having to explain the whole science behind it and boring them with all that, because they could care less. They're general population. They're here to work out. They're here to better themselves. They're asking us for help with them. So it's on us to keep them engaged and keep things fun, so that they keep wanting to come back day in and day out. And again, those are on Fridays and Tuesdays here, just so that the system balances out. Now, I can always move things around based on shorter weeks, longer weeks. If we don't have a Saturday, I'll throw in some red zone, probably in the middle here, or kind of depending on where we're at in our phases of training. Everything can always shift around. So this is just a general kind of idea of where I like to take things. Last but not least, kind of moving down towards the end of the system, we're going Metcon on Saturdays. So Saturdays being that typically it would be after a red zone day, right? We should, based on the system, kind of go into a yellow zone. But what I always take into effect with general population is most people are not going to come on Saturdays because they've already trained 5 days a week. If they do come on Saturday, they're typically taking Sunday off, or they have things to do on the weekend, or they're coming on Saturday, but they're going to miss a Monday, and things kind of get weird with general population based on their schedules. So Metcon Saturdays are a lot of fun. Again, here we crank the tunes. I love the loud music. I'll be loud if I have to. There's a lot of high energy, but we'll use a lot of different techniques with this one to keep it different from being just on equipment all the time. So one thing that I like to use here are like dumbbell complexes, right? So stringing movements together there. I like using body weight complexes, right? Again, stringing movements together there, but you don't need any equipment. And then also med ball complexes, right? Because you only need one med ball. And luckily, like I said, we're fortunate here to have the space that I can keep people moving in and out. But the complex is a great way to get the heart rate up, to kind of spike everything up for people without having to use a whole lot of equipment. And it breaks the script of just being, again, like Wednesday on a treadmill or on a bike or something for 15 to 20 minutes. Now we can string a couple different ones together. We can hit all three, and we can string everything together there. And then we just, kind of have some fun with that. A couple examples of these. I kind of wrote some on the sheet there if you have it in front of you. For the dumbbell, for instance, I like to throw typically 4 to 5 simple movements together. It doesn't need to be anything fancy. It doesn't need to be too sexy. Just got to get people moving, and we try to hit everything that we can. I try to hit a push, a pull, lower body, upper body, and then some type of lunge, maybe even a carry, or just some accessory work. So one very simple one that I'll go to is just like an RDL for 5 reps, and then we're going to go squat to press for 5 reps. We're going to do reverse lunges, 5 on each leg, push-ups on the ground, and then finish with some bicep curls. We do 5 reps of each movement until you put the dumbbells down. Once you put the dumbbells down, then you're resting. Again, this is a great way to kind of keep people together. You go, I go for 10 rounds, or I'm going to go and then I want you to rest for 30 seconds, and you're kind of watching the clock, or hit the dumbbell complex and take a walk around the gym right on your rest. So we're getting a little bit of active recovery there, and then come back and do it again. Same thing with the body weight complex. You can string up any type of movement together. One big one that I like is burn the burn. Every time I write it on the board, people are like, oh my gosh, here comes burn the burn again. Like, they know it's going to burn a little bit, and they know it's going to be a little bit higher intensity, but it's going to be a lot of fun, and they don't need any equipment. So for instance, that one's Vern, what's his name? Gambetta. There it is. It's squat jumps, reverse lunges, step ups, and body weight squats, right? So it's bilateral, unilateral movements, going up, going down, changing levels, but you only need body weight. Some people who have a higher training age, for that one, I'll load it with a weight vest. It's very low impact for the most part, besides the squat jumps, but then it doesn't have to be super high squat jumps. I just want people leaving the ground, right? By the time they get 2 or 3 rounds in, their legs are pretty cash. They're only jumping 6 inches off the ground anyway. But it gets the heart rate up, it gets them sweating, it gets them moving. And it's also very, very simple. It's a good way to just kind of interact with people. I'll jump in and do it with them if people need a partner, or you can just, if you want, I always program it and they yell at me for programming all the time, but then I'll jump in and do it with them, and it just builds a little bit better community. And then it gets me sweating with them, and we all kind of come together as one. With the med ball complex, again, this one can be simple. It doesn't have to be super sexy. You don't have to have a ton of space. Really, all you just need is the med ball. And I'll go just for a simple one like squat to throw, med ball overhead slams, a granny toss, and then you can even do a push-up or some type of perpendicular throw into a wall if you have that availability. But again, it keeps the load light and it keeps the intensity high. What we can do is we can always program for reps. We could program for time. We can program like an AMRAP. Hey, you have 10 minutes to get as many rounds as possible. We're doing 5 reps a piece of 3 movements, and people will kind of push themselves to their own limit. If somebody wants to work a little harder, they'll try to work a little faster. Somebody who's just kind of going through the motions, or maybe they're new to the movements and things like that, you can kind of pull them aside and help work them through that, and just kind of, again, build a little bit of community, and without hardly any equipment, right? Some dumbbells, body weight, maybe a weight vest, and then a light med ball can be used there. Now with the Metcons, especially on Saturdays, if somebody is training 5 days a week, it can get a little fishy, especially like if we're starting a new program, people are a little bit sore maybe, and they're just kind of coming in to move. It can get a little bit tricky with a Metcon because people will want to push a little bit harder, or they'll see somebody who's been training here for a few years and they try to kind of keep up with them, and so the risk for injury can increase. What I like to do is I really like to give them a prescribed weight and say, hey, for this week, I want you to stay at this weight, but I want you to try to work just a little bit harder than we did last week at the same weight. So like, for instance, for a dumbbell complex, somebody who's a little less trained, who isn't so sure about the movements, isn't so sure about how the complex really works, I'll give them a light load, like, guys, 10 pounds. We're using a 10-pound dumbbell. I just want you to move through the movements, but we're going to go for 10 minutes, right? And in 10 minutes with 10 pounds, they can get 6 to 8 rounds, and they still get that work. They still get their heart rate up. They still tap into the metabolic conditioning and still get a little bit of a pump depending on what exercises we're doing. But the load is light. Their risk of injury is very low because there's not very much volume in that, but they're still putting in the work. Same with the body weight. It's like everybody needs to be able to control their body weight. So having a body weight complex is a great way to just kind of bring people back and like, hey, you don't always need a whole lot of things. We can keep things simple. All you need is your body. Your body is your tool. Use it. And then with the med ball, a lot of times space can be an issue. All you need is just the ball. And again, the movements can come around there. Push-ups, slams, rotational slams, some type of pillar movement, if you're taking the ball around the hand or you're passing the ball back and forth, or crawls with the ball, tosses, slams, rotational passes. It's kind of endless capabilities here. Rotational lifts without letting the ball go. You don't even have to have the ball leave the hands per se, but it just provides a little bit of external load, and it's a little bit of different tool that gets people kind of out of a different mindset as opposed to, again, being on a piece of equipment all the time. With that, it's, again, the metabolic conditioning can be a little bit tricky as far as putting it into the system. If you don't have a Saturday, that's fine. You don't always have to have like a metabolic conditioning day in the system. Sometimes if we're not running a Saturday, I'll even kind of throw this in on a Friday instead. And the way I'll do that is just kind of, I call it a beach body pump, right? So we'll get people on the Kaisers. We're doing kind of a bleed out system. So for 20 seconds, you try to hit as many bicep curls on the Kaiser as you can, while your player 2 is kind of decreasing the weight as you fatigue. Again, that keeps the load coming down, right? So their risk of injury under that high load goes down because the weight is dropping. But then it also gets people just feeling good. General population love to feel like a pump, the pump effect. So it gets people a nice quick pump, upper body pump. It's not super taxing on the system, but it makes them feel good for the weekend, and what makes them want to come back on Monday and really get after it. And I'll kind of throw these in. I can throw them in across the week. What else? Yeah, so that again, this will all kind of play around. If people can't make it to a sweat and stretch, I'll usually send them with tools. Again, go for a walk, go for a hike. We can, as a class, go for a hike. We have some hills right down the street from here, so we can all kind of walk there as a warm up or meet there, and we'll do a little bit of a warm up, and then we'll go for a nice easy hike up and down and tap into the yellow zone. Red zone, again, I love utilizing competition. You go, I go, a team aspect. Everybody loves to win. Most people hate to lose or hate to come in last. And then it kind of taps into that max effort type of time frame and type of actual getting into a max effort zone. And then with the green zone, again, kind of starting the weeks out, gets people feeling good. It doesn't shy people away from anything. Coming in and being able to accomplish something on a Monday is a great way to kick off the rest of the week. And then having it on Thursday, they're coming off of regen day. They typically feel pretty good. So we need to keep them feeling good before we get into that higher intensity work on a Friday and then tapping into a Saturday. Play, again, is a great way to utilize either yellow zone or green zone with that. Depending on the game that you play, depending on what we can do. A big one here is pool volleyball. You guys love pool volleyball here. It just gets people moving, and we can kind of stay in that yellow zone because we can play for 30, 35, 40 minutes before we actually have to just get out of the pool if you're getting pruny and whatnot. Or like on Thursdays, we'll play ultimate handball for 15, around 15 minutes. I usually try to keep it on the back end of the session. And it just kind of, again, it breaks the script. It gets people moving. It gets people having fun. It gets people competing again if people were past athletes and kind of missed that competitive factor. It brings the team together. It brings the culture together with the groups. We'll do group-on-group competitions. So my 6 a.m. guys will compete against the 6 p.m. guys who train at a different time. And it's a lot of fun. Gets people off of equipment. You don't need any equipment except for whatever sport you're playing. Ultimate Frisbee is great. Ultimate handball is great. Spike ball. People love spike ball here, which is kind of weird because it's such a close quarters game. But by the end of it, we're round robin tournaments and moving people around. Foursquare is another great one. The adults really love Foursquare because it's something that some of them played as a kid or their kids play it now. So they can kind of learn some new techniques. They practice that. They're moving side to side. They're jumping around. They're hooping and hollering. Typically when we play Foursquare, I like to add in a punishment if the ball goes between your legs and we call it nutmegged. I'll make them go inside and do 200 jump ropes or some burst of feet or something, run to the curb and back. It just keeps it interactive, keeps people moving. And then on Saturdays with the Metcon, again, I try to break the script from a strength standpoint and from an equipment standpoint. We'll use dumbbell complexes, light load, moving things around, 5 to 6 rounds, you go, I go, or you go, walk down to the curb and back as your active rest. Body weight complexes are always great. I'll kind of throw these in. We can do it for AMRAPs. You can do certain complexes that you can find through research, things like that. Again, very low volume, but the intensity can still be high based on how far the person wants to push themselves. And then med ball complex as well. You don't need a whole lot of space. You don't need any equipment, just a ball. And you can usually hit kind of all aspects of movement, pushes, pulls, rotational, pillar movements, things like that. And again, it breaks the script from the rest of the week. Sundays can be a complete day off or get people outside, ask people to go for a walk or a hike or ride their bikes or whatever weekend warriors kind of do. And then swooping back around to Monday, it starts all over. So that's typically how I'll program ESD for my general population, especially in a big group setting. I try to hit all phases, all zones throughout the week. If somebody is coming in that only trains twice a week, let's say Tuesday, Thursday, right, they're still getting a red zone and a green zone, and then hopefully outside of the gym, they are still doing something. If they come on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, they're actually hitting all 3 zones there. If somebody comes Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, they're getting into that Metcon aspect and their body is still able to recover and adapt before we get back to everything. With training ages, again, I'll usually give people rep ranges. So for here, we're going 30 on, 30 off times, 10 to 12 rounds. People with the lower training age, hey, we're going to stay closer to the 10 round range. For people with the higher training age, we can kind of push into that 12 rounds. Same thing with the red zone. Somebody who has a lower training age or is new to red zone ESD, I'll limit them here, right? Kind of 6 rounds, while everybody else can kind of push to 10. Just to keep things safe for everybody, keep people out of injury, but then still give people the work that they need to accomplish there. So that's it. To me, it seems simple. I know sometimes it can get a little kind of like a rabbit hole, right? With ESD, we want to try to hit everything all the time, keep things fun. We don't have equipment. We do have equipment, whatever it has to be. I try to stay to my ratios with whatever I have, whether that be, a dumbbell complex, hey, we're going to go 1 to 5, work to rest, whatever it has to be. Utilize the tools that you have in order to hit the system, and just try to cover everything as a bigger picture and not so much everything on one certain day. Again, this can be moved around, shifted depending on the week, depending on the training phase, depending on attendance of a certain person. This does not have to be set in stone, but it's just a great outline that I've always used since I've been coaching here to kind of make sure I'm getting all my bases covered and helping people out to the best of their ability. So that's pretty much it right there. If anybody has any questions, yeah, cool, Colin.
We definitely have some good questions here. Thank you guys for submitting them. There's still time to throw some in there, so if you have some or some are prompted as Andrew's going through some more of this, please send them over.
Yeah.
So the first question I think was, or the first question I want to ask was kind of general, like maybe someone doesn't quite understand how taking some of these concepts apply to the general population, and maybe reframe that of like, how do you, when you have someone come in, how do you speak to that science that maybe could be very complex, talking about anaerobic threshold, peak power,
right,
how that relates, how do you relate that to your individuals who are maybe new or not 100% bought into resting a ton so you can get into a red zone, like those types of things.
Right.
How do you speak to it?
Again, with that population, it can be tough creating the buy-in, right? A lot of people that are new to the system don't really know how rest can benefit them, right? So like if we are going for 12 minutes, a lot of people will just want to push for 12 minutes and completely crush themselves, but then they don't want to come back on Tuesday. They don't want to come back the rest of the week. So kind of digging into the science and just being like, hey, we have a big picture here, showing them the overall big picture and saying, with this moderate intensity day, I am actually preparing you for the next day, which is preparing you for the next day. So kind of letting them know that they do need to rest, that they do need to work at a certain intensity in order to build and create that foundational level that they can continue to improve on. Really will start to create a little bit of buy-in. As far as like anaerobic threshold and things like that, especially on like red zone days when they see they have 50 seconds rest, that can be tough if we are just saying, hey, you're going to be on this bike. I want you to go max effort for 10 seconds and then rest for 50. That 50 seconds can seem like an eternity. People will get bored really quick if that's the case. And that's where I'll use a team aspect or some type of competition. Even if it's not a set competition, I'll say, hey, okay, so you are going to kind of be competing with the person next to you. I want you to try to beat their distance every time. I want you to try to beat their feet climbed every time. I want you to try to beat their watt output on the bike every time at a certain gear. And it kind of changes their mindset a little bit to be able to work harder, and then they want that rest, right? Like after a 10-second max interval sprint, by round 4 or 5 of this, you're going to be wanting that 50-second rest. And it just kind of shows them a shift in everything, that when you are working at max intensity, you do need that rest on time to recover for the next rep. So we don't really have to use big words like anaerobic threshold or lactate threshold or max power output. But if we can just shift them a little bit to want to actually rest here, to prepare for the next rep or prepare for the next day, that will kind of shift their whole mindset into using the whole system instead of just one thing at a time.
Awesome. There was a question about, since your times vary
Mhm.
each day for the ESD portion, what's the total time per session each day that you have with the employees? Or sorry, the employees. I'm on the work.
That's all right. That's all good.
I work with employers all the time. So what portion, like about how much time do you spend on each section? Movement prep, pillar prep, strength, ESD, like break down that total section.
Right. Yeah. Like. So I have an hour each day with these people across the board. So you can kind of see how that would get a little funky if things are shifting here. Typically with pillar prep, movement prep, pillar prep is usually no more than 5 minutes. Right at the start of the session, I already have people coming in. I'm saying, hey, grab the foam roller. We're hitting 1, 2, 3 specific areas, 30 seconds a piece, and then we're heading outside or getting in right into movement prep. Movement prep for us is typically anywhere from 7 to 10 minutes. So that already with pillar prep and movement prep is the first 15 minutes of the session. From there, our strength portion can kind of vary, again, depending on what we have coming up. So maybe on Mondays and Thursdays, we can keep that strength session pretty compact. 1 or 2 circuits, a primary circuit and a secondary circuit, and then we're getting into the green zone ESD because we need that 10 to 12 minutes. So typically our strength session is around 30 minutes, 30 to 35 minutes, sometimes 40 minutes, depending on what we have kind of going on. Those longer strength sessions might end up here, but only as far as not so much intensity, but maybe a little bit extra volume. So we're hitting 4 sets, right, with a lower load instead of 3 sets or 2 sets or 10 sets of whatever that we can do here. So 5 minutes pillar prep, around 10 minutes for movement prep, around 30 to 40 minutes for strength, and then we're getting into that ESD the last 15 to 20 minutes of the session. So if we're going here, by the time transition times happen, people get set up on whatever piece of equipment they want. If it's a user choice, I got somebody who wants to do a treadmill and then they decide, oh, I'm going to go to a rower. I have to wait for that transition time and get everybody set up so that we can do it as a group. By that time, we have about 15 minutes right here. They do 10 to 12 rounds, 10 to 12 minutes of that, and then we have about 3 minutes left. I'll give people certain breathing techniques and kind of throw in some regen on the back end, again, to get people feeling good out the door. I especially utilize those on red zone days. So again, here the volume is a little bit shorter on that back end, so we have 15 minutes, right? Let's say it's week 1 of the program, we're only doing 6 rounds of red zone ESD, and now we have that extra amount of time. But if I really was able to push people into max effort red zone, they're going to want a little bit of recovery time, and I don't want to just send somebody out the door that just did max interval sprints. So I will get them on the mats. We'll do a little bit extra regen. We'll kind of tie that into their strength portion. Hey, you know, today we had a lot of anterior hip stuff. We're going to trigger point the anterior hips. We're going to hit a quad hip flexor stretch. We're going to get you utilizing your breath. I want you to hold that stretch for 5 to 6 deep breaths, and that helps regen them on the back end after a heavy, intense session there. So in an hour, 5-minute pillar prep, around a 10-minute movement prep, around a 30-minute strength session, and then around a 12 to 15-minute ESD session with some regen at the back end is how I'll break it down.
All right, we've had some really good questions, so keep sending them in. There's some really great programming questions.
Yeah.
So the first one is, if you only had a half hour, you know, to try and cover a lot of this, how might you condense? What would you focus on? How would that change maybe what zones you're trying to hit? What would that look like if you're trying to squish?
Yeah. That is a good question because I am fortunate enough to have an hour 6 days a week, right?
So you have a half an hour.
A half hour 3 times a week is really good, actually. Where I'll kind of condense things, and it all really depends on the individual and what they're capable of. If I have somebody who is a weekend warrior or hikes every weekend or does something every weekend and they're tapping into yellow zone and green zone on their off days from the gym, I will try to flip that and benefit them with maybe some red zone or some extra green zone, depending on what they're already hitting. for instance, somebody comes in and they hike, every weekend, every Saturday, Sunday they're hiking, every Wednesday they go for a long swim. So they're getting some yellow zone ESD on their own. So those 3 days a week that they're in-house, I will try to hit a little bit more red and a little bit more green to balance out the system. If I only have a half an hour, and say that's 3 times a week, half an hour, whatever it has to be, we can actually string some pillar prep and movement prep together, right? So maybe we're getting a little bit of activation as well as some movement prep, getting into some more dynamic flexibility and things like that at the same time. So string that together instead of 15 minutes at the top. Now maybe you drop that down to 7 or 8 minutes, right, and condense that. The strength work, if they need strength, I would say focus on the strength, right? The ESD can always come later. If they are pretty strong or strength is not their overall goal and they really need a little bit more conditioning or ESD per se, then keep the strength very simple, 3 blocks of something, a primary block, a secondary block, and maybe an accessory block. Condense that down into a couple supersets and then utilize that last 10 minutes of the session for some ESD. If they need to hit green zone, then you got 10 minutes of green zone. If they need to hit red zone, they got 10 minutes of red zone. If you need something getting into a little bit more yellow zone, again, keep the work to rest ratio the same because they will self-pace into that zone on their own. And across the board, 3 days a week, if whatever they're doing outside of the gym, that's what we try to counterbalance inside the gym. Yellow zone outside, we'll hit green and red inside. Green zone outside, we'll hit yellow and red inside. So they can be more balanced and more well-rounded as a person.
There are a couple questions about our ESD technology, which today's lecture was not designed necessarily to highlight. That. For those who are not familiar with it, really what our ESD tech is, it's loaded into certain pre-core pieces of equipment, the bikes, the ellipticals, and the treadmills. And essentially you start with doing an assessment that kind of replicates a bit of a VO2 max format. And then that creates a kind of periodized plan similar to what Andrew's talked about, looking at work to rest ratios, looking at different power outputs and different speeds, intensities, those types of things, and progresses it as you go through, and then you retest to find your new zones as you find a higher intensity. So for those who are not familiar with that, I guess one of the questions, we won't be highlighting that today. There are some materials from like a sales deck perspective and a little bit of an overview of what that is. If you're curious, on our Google Drive on the sandbox side of things. But do you guys use that here? We have some of those pieces.
We do have some of those pieces. We have had clients that use that. We had a couple studies going on in-house that were really utilizing that equipment, and it was really cool for me to see. I personally don't use that. I use this system for my groups, but I've had a couple clients come from those study groups into these groups, and it was very similar to something like this. Again, like Colin said, they do it's a sub VO2 max test. It's a walking test. The incline just kind of keeps raising up. They calculate their number, and then based on that, every time they get on a piece of equipment, whether it be that treadmill, a bike, or an elliptical that the ESD is kind of ingrained in, all they have to do is log in, and it pulls up their numbers for that piece of equipment, which is really cool because now it kind of almost, I get to step back and assess them and make sure things are going okay in different aspects. And then I can be like, okay, hey, we have a red zone day today. You're going to hop on your piece of equipment, log in, and get going. So it kind of allows me to step back and coach the person a little different as opposed to always having to program for certain ESD levels. And it kind of gets them on their own kind of train, per se. And then it will retest, reassess, and they can see their progress as they go, as opposed to if I'm programming week 1, you only hit 6 reps on red zone, and now week 4, when we get into it, maybe week 2 and 3, you were a little under the weather, maybe you missed a day, maybe you weren't ready for it, maybe you didn't fuel properly, and now you still hit 6 reps. Like, it can be a little bit discouraging for people, but with the ESD in the actual system and them rotating through it on their own, they can see their progress continually that way. So it's really cool system to use.
There's another question. Again, we've got time for a few more, so if you want to throw one in here towards the end, please do, but we've definitely got a couple more. One, kind of saying, hey, I've got a Metcon-based class. I'd like to focus on a red zone emphasis, I've got 45 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if I'm only doing 6 to 10 minutes of work per se, you know, what does the rest of that time look like?
Yeah.
I know for me, I would certainly take that opportunity, understanding that red zone is really challenging to achieve, especially if you don't have something like a Versa climber or a Woodway curve or an air assault bike, where you can easily and more safely get to that max heart rate.
Yeah.
I probably want to, you know, increase my pillar prep and movement prep to make sure that they're able to handle something that might have a lot of eccentric or challenging or potentially risky elements. And you talked about adding some extra regen on the back end. You know, maybe take me through, you know, something that might look like.
So that's typically what my Saturdays look like, right? It's a Metcon day. It gets people in-house. We're moving a lot differently. We're off the barbell for the most part. So my pillar prep and movement prep will be a little bit longer. Say I have a 45-minute session, an hour session. I can drag that pillar prep, movement prep out to around 20 minutes, maybe even 25 minutes. I want to prepare the people and prepare the body to go at that max intensity. So having the body, like the end result, wanting to be a max intensity and max, you know, intervals, whatever it has to be, 1 to 5 work to rest. I want to make sure that people are warmed up for that. So pillar prep from there will be, hey guys, we have, you know, a dumbbell complex today. We're going to hit major muscle groups all over the place. Let's go ahead and roll out the quads for 30 seconds each leg. Let's hit the glutes. Let's hit the hamstrings. Let's hit the lats. Let's hit the pec. Let's hit the big parts of the body. And that'll be, you know, that could take 5 to maybe 10 minutes for some people. From there, we're going to go outside and we're really going to take our time getting through movement prep. We're going to do, you know, 5 to 6 reps of each dynamic flexibility. We're going to march a lot. We're going to skip a lot. We're going to do a lot of different neural activations to prime the system and make sure they're ready to rock and roll. So with that being dragged out, maybe 20, 25 minutes, now we're coming in-house and now we're hitting something that could be 6 to 10 minutes of super, super high intensity work. So now that drags that out to, you know, 30 minutes, 35, maybe 40 minutes. And now we still have time on the back end for some regen, right? People need to be able to come down from that. They need to be able to ramp up, be prepared for the part that we're going to be hitting, hit that part at the certain desired intensity, and then be able to come down off of that so we can safely get them out the door.
There's another question about, like, what would you do for only 3 days a week? I think Andrew hit on that a little bit earlier, focusing probably more on your green zones and red zones. Especially if you have a lot shorter time. He doesn't know this, but I'm going to make him write a 3-day-a-week program from an ESD standpoint. Not now, but afterwards on the board. I'm going to snap photos of that and of this 5 or 6 day a week program. I know it's a little bit small and tough to see. I know someone mentioned that, so I'm going to snap some photos, post it on the Google Drive page. If you don't have access to Google Drive, just email continuousimprovement@teamexos.com. We'll just send you those as hard files. But he'll do a 3-day-a-week program with maybe looking at like 30 to 45 minutes of the total time for the session. For those of you, because I know a lot of you coach lunchtime sessions in the work environment. You don't have people for 5 or 6 days. You don't have them for a full hour. You know, this is just, you know, Andrew's experience. He's got a good setup here. The next piece or next question was, how do you change, or do you change, work to rest ratios and equipment selection based on the strength theme that you're in? So when we're talking about, like, are we focusing on a strength theme? Are we focusing on work capacity, you know, hypertrophy, whatever? How does that change your ESD programming to tie it all together?
Yeah, absolutely.
That can be a really long question.
Yeah, it really can be, and it can be a really long answer. So based on the strength portion, that definitely will have an effect on the ESD portion as well. Typically on higher volume, higher intensity strength days, we're not going to be tapping into a red zone, right? The central nervous system is already getting pretty taxed from a strength standpoint. With that already being a major factor, this can only put people at a higher risk of injury, especially general population. If they are working hard on the weights, things will start to be a little bit more achy. Things will start to be a little bit more fatigued. People will start wanting more rest days in between because the strength portion has them more sore. So if I have a super heavy strength day, I might go ahead and switch that to a green zone day and just, again, get people moving. It doesn't have to be 30 on, 30 off. It doesn't have to be, you know, 10 on, 50 off. It can be a little bit higher intensity per se here with a green zone and a heavy strength day. if we cut this down to like a 15 on, 15 off times 6 rounds, right? Because now they're getting a quick burst of work and a quick rest, and that rest will start to feel a little bit shorter. People will start to feel like they're working a little bit harder, but the volume is still pretty low. Another thing that I can do that I've had some success with is actually breaking the ESD up into sets of itself. So I'll be like, all right, guys, hey, we have 10 on, 15 off sprints, whatever it has to be, 15 on, 15 off sprints for 4 rounds. We're going to rest for 90 seconds to 2 minutes, and then we're going to do it again, right? So now we're getting into that 10 to 12 minute zone, but we're also getting a little bit of rest in there and letting people settle down and getting green zone work that way. If we have a day where we're working on maybe just like we're in a power phase and we're going power here, it's a lighter load, we're moving things a lot quicker, that can actually prime the system for a red zone day, because their CNS is already waking up. They're not getting a whole lot of volume as far as load, but the intensity is high during the session, and then we can hit a quick red zone ESD and keep all of our higher intensity stuff to one day before we get into like a yellow zone day and have them back off. So the strength portion will definitely have an effect on that, but that's where we have to kind of be careful on, okay, how much load are we actually putting on the body, on the certain joints, what we're doing here. If we have a super heavy squat day, I'm probably not going to put people on the Versa too much, probably not going to put people on a bike too much, things that are super quad dominant. So we start getting into patellar tendonitis and things like that start to affect the front side of the leg, and then that kind of backs people off. So if we have a heavy squat day, we might go out and do just something different. We might just row, we might just walk on a curve or use a curve, utilize something that'll hit a little bit more posterior chain and get people moving in a different way. Yeah, so that's about that one.
Yep.
Yeah.
So we've got 2 more questions.
Okay.
One, I might speak a little bit for you. There's a question about pairing strength programming with this from a movement selection standpoint.
Yeah.
And again, just a reminder, it's been a while since you've watched the XFS or XPS, or you haven't gotten into that yet, definitely recommend doing that. It goes into our strength kind of template in great detail. We really look at it as we want to try and hit as much of a full body as possible, especially if you only have 2 or 3 days.
Yeah.
You want, a good balance of upper push, upper pull, lower push, lower pull. If you're going with maybe a 4-day-a-week program, maybe we split up those movements.
Yeah.
We're always looking at it as movements, not muscles, pushing and pulling. So we split it up typically Mondays at AP facilities, upper push, lower pull. So that's your bench press, your overhead press, along with your kind of hip hinging, RDLs, glute bridges, those types of things.
Yeah.
Then flip-flopping it the next day. Your upper pull, your chin-ups and your rowing, and then your lower push, that's your lunges and your squats. So again, we know that from a research-based standpoint, full body, 3 times a week is kind of your bread and butter. At, whether you want to get bigger, you want to lose weight.
Right.
All the research shows trying to get more of that full body, which typically means hitting some lower body more frequently. We don't typically do a body part split at all at our facilities unless we have a very specific population and a very elite level bodybuilder or physique competitor or something like that. So I didn't want to put words in your mouth, but
that's perfect.
Just trying to get through it, that time to think about that. So while you were speaking, the last question that we want to talk about is with regards to testing. So from an ESD testing standpoint, do you guys do that? How frequently do you do that? What testing do you do with your groups? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, so we would definitely have a testing portion, especially for new incoming clients. One test that we like to utilize here, it's a little bit rough. It's 500 feet on the Versa for time. One, it gets people accustomed to that piece of equipment that just looks weird in the end of the room. But 2, it also helps kind of let us know where they are at total body conditioning wise. We have a couple standards there. For males, a respectable time is anywhere from 2.5 to 3 minutes. For females, it's anywhere from 3 minutes to 3.5 minutes. So that's where we try to get them in that. And that's day 1 in the door, like that's your ESD. While everybody else is doing something here, we like to get them assessed with that, because that's an easy kind of test and retest for our guys here. Usually about every month or month and a half, we'll have people retest that just so they can see their progress. We have a lot of people that sometimes this is their first time training, so the Versa Climber is their first time completely on any piece of equipment like that. They hit 500 feet in, let's say 5 minutes, 6 minutes or whatever. And now after a month of training in the system, whether it's 6 days a week, whether it's 3 days a week, whether it's twice a week, and they're already getting into better conditioning shape, they come back and retest that 500 feet Versa, and now they've knocked off 2 minutes, right? So they went from 6 minutes on there to 4 minutes on there, and they still feel great. So now that's kind of, it shifts their mindset a little bit of, hey, this was hard last time. Yeah, it's still hard this time, but I got better by X amount of minutes. So we'll test and reassess that about every 4 to 6 weeks. But also just within the program, right? Like if I have somebody who, let's say Friday, we're doing red zone ESD, you're on the rower, your goal is to hit, 5,000 meters in X amount of time. Week 1, you come in and just under that at like 4,800 meters, right? And now week 2, that gives them a goal, and they'll push a little bit harder so they can tap into red zone a little bit more. They hit that 5,000 meter goal, and now next week we bump that up for them again. So, hey, last week you hit 5,000 meters. This week I want you to hit 5,200 meters. And they'll be able to keep pushing themselves, but it's also kind of intra-session test and retest throughout the whole program.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, that's it for us today. Andrew, I want to thank you.
Absolutely,
thank you. In for us last minute.
Yeah.
Stefan's out in Germany doing German things. I think it's Oktoberfest right now, so probably drinking beer. Thank you for stepping in and delivering this. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you for all the questions. We recorded this. The recording will be posted within the next 24 hours in the usual spots. You'll be able to access it through Google Drive. It's also on YouTube if you have that link. So just reach out to us if you need access. If you have staff members who weren't able to make it today, feel free to send it to them or let them know that it will be available to them. If you have any follow-up questions, again, hit us up at continuous improvement at teamexos.com. Again, thank you all so much, and have a great rest of your day and great rest of your week.